zone to be. From a yin to my yang to my yang to Z. Put a grin on my chin when you come to me. Cause I'm weird, I'm a one of a kind, and I'll bring death to the place you're about to be. Another river of blood running under my feet. Forged in a fire lit long ago. Stand next to me, you'll never stand alone. I'm last to leave, but the first to go. Lord, make me dead before you make me old. I'll feed on the fear of the devil inside of the enemy faces in my sight. Aim with a hand, shoot with a mind, kill with a heart like Arctic ice. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a warrior, this is my song. I am a warrior and this is my song. I'm basking the glow of the rising war. Lay waste to the ground of an enemy shore.
I read you Lima Charlie, loud and clear.
Welcome to Stew and The Nunn presents Lima Charlie. For those not versed in the phonetic alphabet, Lima Charlie means loud and clear. For the purpose of the series is to spotlight GWOT era and GWOT veterans telling their stories. Our guest this week is the Nunn half of Stew and The Nunn. Please welcome Toby Nunn.
Well, thanks for having me, man. Great intro, by the way. There's some iconic pictures and clips in there. And then, of course, I believe I see Taco Bell laying down like Lima Charlie. So I'm a big fan. I love it.
That you do. We'll have Taco on here and give some of his stories in the future. So let's start with who you are. Let's start with yourself.
Well, unlike most of the guests that we're going to have on the show, is I'm actually a non-citizen. All right, I was born and raised in a bush town way up northern British Columbia, called Terrace, British Columbia, right on the Skeena River. Best freshwater salmon fishing on the planet. Also, number one in freshwater steelhead in terms of size, and the home of the Guinness Book of World Records for largest salmon, with the Skeena and the Kalem rivers. So I'm from like a tiny little lumber town, bush town, and my dad and everyone else that was around me was smart enough to realize that I was too small to make it in that world, and I needed to get to a world that a little dude could make it. And so I ended up in the United States, early 90s. Well, when I say early 90s, the earliest of 90s, like 1990, and went for it in the United States in an effort to get an education. I would say that learning to graduate United States high school and to be eligible for United States University, I needed, a certain amount of American history, American government knowledge. And as I was learning that, in Canada, I learned all about the, Canadian political system and at the time, Her Majesty's system. When I actually read and studied the Constitution of the United States of America, I had an epiphany. And while I kept it to myself for the most part, I definitely didn't talk about it at home because I was already a bit of a Benedict. I found the United States, the premise of the United States of America, the Constitution of the United States of America, a beautiful thing, beautiful thing. And I truly wanted to be part of it. I definitely didn't want to go back to the bush. One, because it was the bush, but two, there were just these subtle but profound differences between the United States and Canada, where I felt like my spirit, was more at home. Being a little guy, I like to run my mouth. So freedom of speech is a big thing. My dad was an exceptionally strong man of faith, and the ability to practice your faith however you see fit. In Canada, the government owns the media, literally. So like you don't always know what you're getting is truthful or factual. And no, I just really like the US. And then I came in to go to university. I really liked the game of golf. My grandfather, who was a subject of the kingdom, served under Her Majesty's service, was part of the War Office. He started off as a field artillery officer in Africa during the Second World War, and then moved into Italy, and then from there entered into like a different form of service. So just like long story short, with him, they reported him as dead, and he went basically undercover, and he had a talent with languages, dialects, and then he worked in secret or covertly throughout the European theater. And then after the war, went back to the Isle of Man, which is where he's from, a small island between England and Ireland, and found that, because he was reported dead, his wife and daughter, my Aunt Val, had remarried and moved on because they thought he was dead. And then he started another family, which is where my mother came from. And then my dad, racing motorcycles on the Isle of Man, met my mom, and bada boom, bada bing, a family later. But he was my only connection to the military. And when I was a little kid before his passing, he shared a couple of little things with me, but he was the golfing professional at the Douglas golf course. So here's a guy that I thought was a mountain of a man, much like my father. He was a man of character, but he had this military thing where my dad did not. My dad, about as Canadian as you can be, didn't have that. He had conviction. He had strong conviction, but he didn't have that military experience. He didn't have that opportunity. And in his youth, it was during the time of Vietnam. And my dad, while Canada didn't participate in the later years, he was very outspoken about, the American political part of it, anti. And then we had several people in our circle that we knew that two of which were draft dodgers that had left the United States and moved to Canada to avoid the draft or hid from it. And so it was just a different experience for me. And I didn't have like that military understanding, except the little bit that my grandfather told me. And I ended up in the United States, working in the golf industry, trying to follow my grandfather's footsteps. And then I was a bonehead, and was irresponsibly sexually. And, found myself, being an expectant young father with a weird life circumstances and just being irresponsible, and found and met some Army recruiters in a hilarious way. I was playing golf.
I'm gonna pause you real quick. So your dad in Vietnam and his feelings, other than Vietnam, what was your dad's feelings about the United States? And where I'm going with this is for him to pick up and move you because he realized it would be better life for you. Was it in conflict with his own feelings for the United States?
Oh, 100%.
That's true love for your kids.
Yeah, no, like I will tell you, my dad was a man of faith, one of the strongest men of faith I've ever encountered in my life. It was unwavering. uncompromising, unrelenting. And he lived his life according to the good book, and turning the other cheek in the teachings of Jesus was, he was a New Testament guy. He was not an Old Testament guy. And he believed that America was this warmongering society. And, you know, like all the things like, well, they have guns, they have all this, like all the things that people say about America that truly don't understand freedom say, because we really felt like we were free. We didn't know that we weren't. I see that here all the time. That's a whole different subject matter, but he was not a fan. And so like we had like 3 rules, like major house rules. You know, one was, you know, no premarital sex, definitely no sex with dudes. And 3 was no tattoos. And, you know, like here I am, expecting a kid, in another country. And I end up, you know, dealing with it in the most immature capacity. A buddy of mine, his dad, a guy through golf, his dad had built and developed this golf course in Beckley, West Virginia, Saddlebred Golf Club. And I got a little bit of a gig helping them put in some technology there, as well as like, you know, helping in terms of like golf pro staff. And, you know, like I said, was irresponsible. And I was playing golf in the afternoon, in the evening. I was exceptionally high. And, you know, I drank a little bit, but at that moment in time, like I smoked a lot of weed. And, you know, it's hiding from reality. And I end up playing golf with these 2 guys, a younger guy and an older guy, a slightly older guy, a more mature guy. And the younger guy had a bit of a mouth and was a bit of a gambler. And I ended up getting into his pocket, and he didn't have the money to pay. And I was kind of pissed about that. And I wanted, you know, like out of principle, I wanted to collect my debt. He gave me an address to go to the following day to collect the debt, because he'd met his daily ATM or whatever bullshit that he told me at the time. It ended up being a recruiting office. and and so like I walk in, and the older guy was like, he was the sergeant first class.
Oh, nice.
I know that now, like, you know, at the time I didn't know, but like he was the boss, right? He was like the HMF FIC or whatever. And he didn't like the fact that I came in there. In fact, he did not appreciate that. The
I mean, you could
NCOIC.
obviously see it was a recruiting office when he showed up at the address, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
Still
I'm
went
like,
in.
this mother, you know, like I was like, this degenerate, you know, he's welching on his bet, not looking at myself, of course, and being like that I was a junkie loser kid, you know, instead of like trying to get my shit together because I got a kid coming, I'm like getting stoned and playing golf. And you know, he puts me in the back, right? He like doesn't let me stay in the area where all the recruiters are. He puts me in this back room with like the stale pizza boxes and shit. And there was this cardboard cutout of an airborne ranger in the swamp in Florida coming up, like M4, you know, regulator, just like one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. Like instantaneous blue vein throbber. Like, what is this? This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I asked about it, and they laughed at me. They're like, well, that's a man, and you'll never be that, so don't worry about it. You know,
And what year is this?
Oh, this is like mid 90s. This is like 95-ish, 96. And like I was just a kid. And you know, like I told them on the on the golf course, that I was Canadian. We had some, banter back and forth. And, I was like, hey, how do I become that? And, they like, you don't, like, that's a man, you're not. Just take your money and leave. And like, it really, like, it offended me. Like, it deeply personally offended me that, like, I truly believed that I could be anything that I wanted to be in life, including a screw up. I just, like, didn't know what I wanted to be. And I saw that, and something in me was like, oh, like, your grandfather, like, why do you think your grandfather was a great man? Oh, because he served, because he went to war. And like, I thought about, what was my favorite comic as a kid? G.I. Joe, Unknown Soldier. And, like, seeing the Korean veterans in Canada, like, marching on Remembrance Day, Armistice Day, like, I just always was impressed. And we never saw uniforms other than Mounties. And so, like, anytime you see something that's not a Mountie, it was just super impressive. Mountie's also impressive, but they told me, like, I'd need, a congressman to help me, like, I'd have to have a letter. And little did they know, like, I had some connections. And, like, next thing you know, into their office comes a fax letter from, Don Young's office out of the District of Alaska, because, like, I'd helped hang some door hangers and shoveled some walks, like, while they were campaigning, to help, get me a little upgrade on my personal status. And they were like, you got to take the ASVAB. And I got to tell you, like, I was high, like crazy high. Took the ASVAB. They told me to come back. There's a MEPS in Beckley. And so, like, I go to the MEPS, I take the ASVAB, I get done. It's like 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. And they're like, oh, you got to come back in the morning or whatever. So in the morning I went back, and I shaved. I showered, I shaved, like, because I had, like, the worst Scooby-Doo wannabe, 3-hair freaking goatee going. Yeah, I was like a kid, like, I don't even think, like, both of my balls had dropped yet. Like, I was still like a soprano in terms of talking. And they were all of a sudden like, oh, you have really high scores. You're in the 99th percentile. You got a 130 GT. And like, I didn't know what any of that meant. And they were like, oh, you should be military intelligence. You should be this, you should be that. And they start talking about these different things. And I remember the one guy going, oh, this month's star MOS is this. And, and I just realized, like, all of a sudden, like, oh, I'm getting hustled. And I'm like, I just want to be that. And I pointed back to that cardboard cutout, and I go, like, I want to be that. And they were like, well, like, you'd make more money if you were this, and you're not going to survive that. And you should be a 88 Mike, which I found out, as a truck driver. And, I could be a truck driver in Terrace, British Columbia, and it'd be a far more exciting and a lot more dangerous driving a logging truck, switchbacking out of a, like, big ass hill, in bad conditions. No, like, I had no interest in that. I liked that. And so I kind of, like, put my foot down. I go, like, if I can't be that, I'm not going to be anything. Like, I don't need you guys, even though
That's an all too familiar story.
Yeah. And, like,
very similar.
But they put me on a RIP contract, and they had some concerns about my drug use. They're like, okay, you have to go back to MAPS. You have to take a drug test. Like, you're gonna have to pass, and you're gonna have to lie. And I didn't. I didn't lie.
Do you think, had that recruiting station been any other branch, would you have still gone?
No way. No, like,
if it had been a Marine or anything.
No, like, the funny thing is, like, I have a bunch of buddies that are Naval Special Warfare. I swam in high school competitively. I loved water polo. My dad was an unbelievable swimmer, had me in the water as a young kid. I would put myself in the waterman category. I make, my family makes its living on the water here. Even though we couldn't surf up there, like that's all I read was fishing and surfing magazines. No, like I would, if the only thing that would have like been different is if I saw like a Navy SEAL, I bet. And I know that sounds like arrogant to say, but in terms of my skill sets at that time and my mentality in life, if someone in front of me from that realm came in front, I might have done that. But I saw this guy coming out of the swamp, and so water was involved. So that was like a big thing for me in seeing that. But no, like Marines or Air Force or anything like that. I love aviation, but there's no way that I'd done. And my best friend in high school went to the Air Force Academy, Jared Rick. And, so like I'd kept in contact with him and going through his experience in the Air Force Academy. No, I wanted no part of that. Didn't interest me in any way. But that ranger coming out of the swamp picture. And so I went to Benning, drank pickle juice every day for 30 days. I worked out. At the time, my mother was around, and she had a place down in Florida. And, I spent a couple weeks there, just like working out every day, drinking pickle juice, drinking water, flushing my system. And I reported, went, back into MEPS, signed my RIP contract, ended up at Fort Benning, Georgia.
So for those that don't know, RIP back then was Ranger Indoctrination Program. So that was
right, correct. Sorry.
Yep.
And went to Charlie 119, the Rocket Chickamauga, and began OSUT training. Somewhere in the OSUT training, I don't really remember exactly when, but I would say it was probably close to halfway, if not over halfway. I got asked to go, or I got taken back to 30th AG, which is the reception battalion at Fort Benning. And that's where they handle like all your in processing and your paperwork and your admin for the infantry training brigade. And they were like, well, we have a problem with your contract. And the problem with the contract that I had was that it was for Ranger Indoctrination, RIP, 11 Bravo, Airborne, RIP. But being Canadian, I didn't qualify to go to SOCOM. And so I became what was called ETNAC, which is a security hold while they did additional background check. But it disqualified me from going to Ranger Regiment. I could still be an infantryman, as they explained to me. And then I became, instead of having the RIP contract, they redid my contract because they offered me the opportunity to leave. But at that point in time, you're not leaving. Like, you've already drank the Kool-Aid, like you've already dealt with everything you're going to deal with emotionally and mentally. You just still got more physically to deal with. I wasn't going home. I wasn't a quitter. I'd like pushed all my shit.
So there's the difference between Ranger qualified, i.e. you have a tab, and being a Ranger, being in Ranger Regiment. Correct. So you didn't even get an option to just at least get your tab?
Not as a private in basic training. Okay. So that opportunity came later, or I earned that opportunity later in my career. Okay. But I didn't get it. So I redid my contract. I became an 11 X-ray, needs of the Army infantry, but I got a fat cash bonus. And so like bless their hearts. They like helped me swallow that pill while telling me I was still going to be a Ranger the entire time. They're like, oh, you're just not going to go to Ranger Major. You're going to go to Ranger school. You're still going to be a Ranger. And, to swallow, this not going to Ranger Regiment pill, you're going to get, I think it was 25 G's or something like that. Which at the time, like baby on the way, soon to be born baby. like that was like perfect. Like I was like, oh, okay, this will work out. And I wasn't quitting. I pushed all my chips in. My dad was like, pretty pissed at me. The rest of my family were like, you're an idiot. You're on your own kind of deal. And, like I went for it. Ended up being in the infantry, the vast majority of my career. Ended up at Fort Hood.
That was your first assignment out of
My first duty assignment was Fort Hood. Loved
You were
Central.
11 Bravo at this point, right?
I
So
was
they
11
made you
Bravo.
an actual 11 Bravo,
So
unlike the
so here's the
Charlie
thing.
or
Yeah, so
Hotel
here's the
or
thing. I was 11 Bravo, and then they're like, we're gonna send you to airborne school, but then they're like, okay, yeah, but we think you're gonna end up not going airborne, so we're gonna send you to this other school, which was going to be the Charlie school. And then I get orders to Fort Hood, and they're like, oh, you got to go do this other school first before you can go to Fort Hood. And it ended up being the 11 Mike School for Bradley's. They sent me to Fort Hood. So I was an 11 Bravo with a Mike identifier, which, like seems like simple now, but at the time, like you were either an 11 Bravo, an 11 Charlie, 11 Hotel, or 11 Mike. So the Bravos were the like regular light fighter infantries. Charlies were light fighter mortarmen. Hotels were Dragon and tow operators, anti-tank infantry, and then mechanized M for mechanized, 11 Mike for mechanized. And I was a Bravo, and I ended up in 1-5 Cav, the Black Knights, 2nd Brigade Blackjack. Got to deploy with them. Got a couple schools with them. Got to deploy with them. Went to Bosnia for S44 or S45. It was one of those two.
what
And
year
then
was that?
that was 98, 97, 98, 98.
My
And
toys
then
were already gone by then.
and then Kosovo kicked off while we were there. So we got to like help transition and work with that situation. Then I came back. I was like the ultimate cheese dick. I hated guard duty. Like I hated motor pool duty. I hated guard duty. I hated duty. Let's just be honest. I only wanted to do fun things. And I realized that if you do better at other things than everybody else, you don't have to do dumb things. And so in Bosnia, we had to pull guard every day. Every day you had to pull guard. Sometimes 8 hours, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes 12 hours. But if you were the guy at guard mount, which is the inspection prior to your guard shift or for the day, and you were the number one guy, you didn't have to pull guard. It was called supernumerary. And so like I studied every book that I could get in front of me. I was taking college. I was working out harder than anybody else. And like when I joined the Army, I weighed 127 pounds. Most people lose weight in basic training. I bulked up to like 140.
Me too.
I was like, I'd never felt stronger. I never felt better, bigger. I walked around speaking in an Austrian accent, fake lats. Look, everybody look at me, Rao. But and then because of like I was always supernumerary, I got like, I don't know, like for every 5 supernumeraries you got an AEM or something. And I got like 4 or 5 AEMs out of like Bosnia. And then I got like an RCOM for getting so many AEMs. And then
So you're an E4 at this point, right? E4.
Becoming E4, yeah.
Okay.
I was becoming E4, and it all happened like super quick. And then I did like, so because I was doing so well, like my platoon sergeant, smart dude, Arthur George, he was like, "Hey, I'm taking you to Soldier of the Month. I'm taking you to Soldier of the Quarter. You're going to Soldier of the Year." And, like prep me for all my promotion boards. And so like when I went into like go to the promotion board, I'd already been Soldier of the Year. Everything just was like super easy, super simple. Went to PLDC back in the day. That was a residential school, like 38 or 40 days, like on Fort Hood in residence, like locked down. Came out of there, distinguished honor graduate, commandant's list, or however you put it. Like as the class leader or whatever, I got to like recite the creed of the non-commissioned officer. Shortly after that, I got hurt in a training accident, and due to the investigation of the training accident, I'd done everything kind of by the book, and maybe too much so because I was such a cheese dick spotlighter. The commanding general of the 3rd Armored Corps at the time was a guy by the name of Leon J. Laporte. He appreciated my honesty and candor in my interview during that investigation. It was a live fire CalFEX exercise, and I was a range safety officer and the soldier in terms of entering and clearing the trench. Was fragging the trench and dropped the grenade. And we were under nods. It was night. It was crappy, and
It was wet, slick, right?
Yeah, and we were able to find it. I was able to jettison it. I took some shrapnel from it, but there were a lot of factors that went into why that happened. And before that happened, I'd actually made my concerns as the range safety officer like out loud. And I didn't mean to like throw shade or my chain of command under the bus. I was just like, "Hey, where's that 1594 or whatever the duty log was called back then?" And like I said these things, and like we were going into a long weekend. I think it was like Thanksgiving or something, and we all of a sudden we stopped training to standard and we started training to time. And and I was like, "Hey, if we don't like uphold the standard, like someone's going to get hurt, and this is why." And then what happens? Exactly what I predicted on the duty log, a few hours before happens to me. And like I got the opportunity to work, directly for the commanding general of the 3rd Armored Corps, Leon J. Laporte. He was a 3-star at the time. I got to do one of my duties was running the better opportunity for single soldiers. And they never should have let a young, horny Toby Nunn like in charge of like military programs like that with single people. Like I was chartering planes to Mexico.
What year are we at?
We're like 2000, like
Okay.
2000. And
so you're an E6 at this point, or E5?
I was
Okay.
E5.
Okay.
And like I'm like chartering planes to Mexico. Like it was just a debauchery, and that like never should have like let me be in charge of anything. But it was a successful program. I would like to think I contributed to some of the success. Like the guy that mentored me, and it was this guy named Chad McGrath. He's still around. He's in San Antonio, Texas now. Him and his wife Shannon. Unbelievable dude. Went on from enlisted, became commissioned, and just retired out last year. I believe as a major or maybe a light bird. Like just super impressive dude. Had a master's degree before. Had a master's before he went commissioned. Like I really like Chad. It was a huge influence on me. I to this day I'm a big fan. But I got selected to attend and represent all of the 3rd Armored Corps and Fort Hood at the Army Boss Conference, and to give a speech. And we're also getting an award for our success with our program. And that was September 2001. And so I was in Washington, D.C., in the District of Columbia, in the vicinity of the Pentagon, on the morning of September 11th. We were slotted, a group of us. I was the lowest ranking guy. Most were command sergeants major. one for like Schofield Barracks, the USARA, the European Command Sergeants Major was there. And so we were going to get this briefing and this tour of the Pentagon from the Sergeant Major of the Army. And then 9/11 obviously happened. The Sergeant Major, like the Army section was the part that was like pretty much a fairly direct hit. It was impacted pretty closely. And so the Sergeant Major of the Army was like, he was MIA for like a couple hours. Like they didn't have accountability for him for actually quite some time. It was kind of scary. And then we got locked down at the Xerox Document University and waited for our opportunity to go back to Fort Hood. In this time, I'd also gone through the Sergeant Murphy program, and I got inducted as a member of the Sergeant Murphy Club, which super proud of that. It's one of the proudest things of my entire military career, being part of that, and that huge thing. And again, like that comes down to, me not wanting to do details, and the easiest way to not do a detail is to like be in charge of it.
Or go to a lot of boards.
That's like, I like do correspondence courses, do college, go to boards.
But on the
you don't sweep the motor pool, man.
I mean,
you got to outshoot everybody. You got to outrun everybody. You still got to do like all that other stuff, but
pulling a lot of CQ, I mean, on the other side, you get a lot of chance to study because those are the things that they want you to do when you're on CQ, right?
Correct.
They don't want you to be reading a comic book or
CQs and staff duty, like that's a brutal thing. Like now I at the time I didn't think much of it. And I look back on it now and I'm like, man, it's a ball breaker. Like it mentally breaks you off. Like once a week you're pulling a 36-hour shift. You're not getting that extra day off. Like, especially if you're a leader. Like maybe if you're one of like the runners, you get 8 hours to go down and, take a nap or whatever. But like, oh, you're a fire team leader or you're a Bradley commander or whatever it is that you are. Oh, you're still going to work. You're still going to the UCOF. You're still going to the range. You're still teaching your guys. Like you don't get that time off. And so like, I was happy to not do that as much. And I went to the boss. He was changing out. He was doing a change of command at the time. And that was for BB Bell, Lieutenant General. Well, at the time, Major General BB Bell, to come in and like take over the 3rd Armored Corps. And I went to the boss and I was like, begged him, please, sir, if you have any love in your heart for me, if I've ever served you in a good way, like, put me in. Like I'm rested, I'm healed, I've trained harder than anybody. Like I'm so chomping at the bit, and I was there. Like I'm home team. Like let's go. Like send me. Here I am. And he was like, absolutely. And put me on orders to Korea. And I was like, you son of a gun. Like I was so mad. But he gave me the speech about like the axis of evil, and I didn't buy it, not in any way, until I got to Korea, and then I got it. I totally got it. And man, that guy gave me the grace of the opportunity to work in a real world operation in the infantry in an amazing unit, got me pinpointed to the 1st of the 506th Kurahi. And then I was able to, just because there was that little mic identifier on my ERB, they moved me down and I ended up being with the 1-9 infantry, the Manchus, earning my belt buckles and, was the dismount squad leader, and then a super squad leader and actually won squad leader of the year for the 2nd Infantry Division while I was there. And that was under General Honore, old Uncle Russ, and Command Sergeant Major Wheeler. Also got my air assault wings there. and then picked up my EIB. And so like now the chest is getting a little bit heavier.
So they sent you back stateside to go air assault, or did you?
No, like
There's
there's
an air assault school.
yeah, it's a hard ass school there.
Really?
The Second Infantry have like a badass situation over there. They actually have like a pretty good schoolhouse. They had a couple things. They did Lures Lick over there. They did air assault. They did a couple like I did my very first Army combative school over there with the Gracies. Horian Gracie was like my first introduction to jiu-jitsu. It's so hilarious. I talk to people about jiu-jitsu all the time. I still train a little bit. And they're like, how'd you get into jiu-jitsu? I'm like, well, I got sent to like this Army school. I got my ass beat by this guy. It's the only thing in the Army I ever contemplated quitting. And that was like Army combatives level 1 back, like in its infancy, And then, went to, I got promoted to staff sergeant, but I didn't get the opportunity to go to BNOC. So I had to go to BNOC. You have a certain amount of time back then, or they took your rank away from you.
Right.
But because I was on orders to Korea, I got an exemption because they don't send you from Korea back CONUS to do a school. There's just too much money, right?
Sure.
Because like, what if you fail out or whatever, any of that stuff. So I when I finally left Korea, but before I left Korea, my plan was to get out of the Army. And I'd applied to the University of Texas, hook 'em, and got accepted and was planning on going to the University of Texas. Then General Leon J. Laporte shows up as the SINC Pacific in Korea. And, one day asked to kind of meet me, and it was a weird thing because I didn't really know that he was like wanting to talk to me. And that was because my name was up on the retention list, and I declined retention. And,
So what year is this?
This is 2002. And
so you're like 6 years in at this, 6, 7 years in.
Yes. And I'm 6 in. Yeah, 6 in. And, I'd been a staff sergeant for a minute, and I got this exemption because of Korea. But I was planning on ETSing out of Korea and calling it and going back to Texas because I love Texas. And, going to University of Texas, and ended up like General Laporte, like in the middle of a field exercise, had me and my squad at the time, like meet him on top of this mountain called Manuel Bong. And he asked me why I was getting out. And I told him like, I had the war in Afghanistan. This is the naivety and ignorance of me, right? And the arrogance. I was like, well, the war is over. You had the opportunity to send me last year. Instead, like Afghanistan's basically over. Little did we know at the time. And, like there's nothing for me. Like I trained all this time. I did all this stuff to be this awesome, like badass infantry terrorist killer. And you sent me to Korea. Like, I'm like, well, I've enjoyed the food and, like the scenery, and I'm in the best physical shape of my life. Like I missed it, like
a little bit of soju here and there.
Yeah, there was a little bit. I'm like, I just need to move on with my life. Like this chapter's closed. The Army was, like going to be a stepping stone, but I saw career potential. But then I was like, I don't want to be in something if I never get to do something. And he expertly talked me into staying in, specifically to join this new unit that was being built out of Fort Lewis. And it was the Strikers. It was a new vehicle. And he was like, hey, your experience with the mechanized world and the light world, your understanding of the real world battlefield, your leadership being an Audie Murphy member, and now all these other schools you've been to, you're really an asset. We don't want you to go. Tell me what you want to stay in, and we'll make it happen. And then on top of it was like, oh, and don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure the war ain't over and you're absolutely going to get your shot. And so, like, and I was like, well, can I get scuba school? Like, cause I was a water guy. I'm like, can I get my scuba bubble? Like, when you say I can have anything I want, can I go to Key West and learn how to swim? And he was like, let's, be a little more realistic on your schools, but like he entertained it. But I had to, like, for me to stay in, I had to do BNOC. And so I was like, hey, can I get BNOC and ANOC knocked out? Can I, pick up a couple schools at Benning while I'm there, and Ranger School. And boom. Next thing I know, like I'm back in the United States, Fort Benning, hammering out BNOC, and I did a school right before BNOC. I can't remember which one that was. Light Leaders course, maybe. Anyway, I did BNOC, did all right at BNOC, to like the standard of everything else that I'd done in my career to that point, which a high level of success, especially academically. And as we were graduating, the United States invaded Iraq, and a lot of the guys that were in that BNOC class were from this new unit being stood up out of Fort Lewis. Like, there was a bunch of us. And so it was really interesting. And like, everyone was kind of from different walks. There were some light fighters there. There were some mechanized guys there. There were some like anti-tank guys there. And I'd been to like javelin school. And that was like a pretty new school. I did that before going to Korea. And, I was like kind of a subject matter expert on the javelin and the clue. And and shooting, I was definitely pretty good at that point in time. And then all our schools all our ATARS orders got canceled, and we all got sent back to Lewis. And I'd never been there. And dude, like, I signed in at Fort Lewis. A week later, I was on an airplane, going into the box in JRTC. Spent
Louisiana.
Yeah, Fort Polk, Louisiana, and did a pretty good training exercise there. Had never even seen one of these vehicles before. And, like, my first day on a Striker was taking it into the box. I was so in over my head. New unit, new guys, new vehicle, no tactics like had even been developed. Like I 7.7 Juliet, I knew, cover to cover. 7-8, I knew cover to cover. These are field manuals. One 7-8's infantry, 7.7 Juliet's mechanized infantry. Of course, I knew like all like battle focused training, and like I was well versed in all that stuff, but I was really in over my head. Like here I'm like, now I'm actually a senior staff sergeant, and I end up getting
for your standard mechanized infantry. That's straight Bradley or okay, straight Bradley.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I end up as a weapon squad leader in Charlie 1, 2, 3, the first of the 23rd, the Tomahawks, and Brad Kelly was my platoon sergeant. And like I was like one of the only dudes in my platoon to like live, like not get killed during that rotation at JRTC. Like I don't know why. Like I was just so blessed. Just like, like everyone around me died, but I didn't. And then we got back to Fort Lewis, and it was like immediately, all right, the Strikers are on the boat, and we're floating them over, and here we go. And so 2003, like we're in Iraq, and Iraq was kind of fun. A lot different than the Balkans, a lot different than Korea. And man, everything was firing on all cylinders for me. My brain was super sharp. Everything made sense, and man, I was exactly where I needed to be when I needed to be there. And hilariously, still a green card holder. Fast forward a year, and it's time to redeploy. It's time to go back. So this is like late 04 or whatever, and we're supposed to go back to Fort Lewis, to Washington State, and like they're like, hey, Nunn, you need to go talk to S1, like, but not ours, like brigade, like you got to go to the palace, like there's some kind of issue with you. And so I went up there with a couple of my leaders, and they're like, hey, dude, well, they didn't call me dude, but they're like, hey, Sarn, like, you're an illegal alien. Your green card's expired, and we can't manifest you because it's a federal felony to like knowingly manifest an illegal alien. Right. So clearly Biden wasn't in charge back then. And so like, they're like, and at the time I was like, hey, cool. Like, just send me to Canada. Like, I'll just walk in or whatever, like what's the big deal? Like, I'm clearly home team. Like I got the flag stitched into my uniform. I got a CIB. At this point in time, I had a V device, attached to a medal. I'm like, I'm clearly home team. I've, like helped write narratives that got guys bronzes, got one, Josh Miller, got a silver star in an event that I was involved in, witnessed like unbelievable heroism. Like I was just like, this doesn't make sense, but
Right.
like I just thought, whatever. And they're like, well, we can't take you anywhere. We'll send you down to Qatar for 4 days. Like you can blow off some steam down in Qatar. So myself, Anthony Rogers, and my company commander, Dwayne Patton, who had just won the year before Best Ranger. We went down to Qatar under his watchful eye and supervision.
A descendant of George S.
No, different spelling. Different
Okay.
spelling.
Okay.
Unlike Troy's like connection. No, Dwayne was just amazing, but like one of the coolest and one of the biggest military studs, like Best Ranger. I mean, the guy could run like the wind, lift anything, shoot. I mean, dude was just like he was Captain America. Like I wanted to be him. I trained with him as much as I could. I wanted to compete with him. He was phenomenal. But they end up hooking me up with this job, which is it's an unconventional job, but the unconventional guys didn't want it. And just the way our battle space was, they decided to put it in the hands of some conventional guys. And that was to like train up and start like the Iraqi army. And so I had to recruit, train, equip, employ. And there was 4 tactical tasks that we were really hoping that we could get the Iraqis to do themselves. And that would mean like freedom for us, and we could go home as a whole, as a country. So I was all about it. I saw it. I believed it. I believed it was possible. I still kind of do. Kind of. I have some doubts about some of it in terms of the cultural differences, but the ended up staying a little bit longer. But that opportunity made me very entrepreneurial. Operating outside the chain of command, operating autonomously. When I say funded, I mean I could go sign for an indiscriminate amount of cash. I didn't have to justify it. I didn't have to, just because of the position I was in and what I was doing. If I said I needed $1 million in cash, I just needed extra backpacks. like no receipts. Like Elon would have definitely like shut me down. But no, and it changed. The trajectory of my career was, going down. General Laporte sent me to the Strikers, which like sent me on a great trajectory. Picked up another, pay grade, and then became Army Trainer of the Year for that, training the Iraqis, which is such a silly thing, silly recognition, because it should have been reserved for people training actual soldiers, not the enemy. But no, like, and then, from there, like, I just kind of wrapped out like my career. I did some like National Guard stuff, some ACRC National Guard stuff after that, counter drug, but nothing great. Did the National Guard. There's a documentary about that tour that year or plus of my life that I'll never get back. Love the guys, the leadership, battalion level and above, can eat a bag.
Is that where you met Troy?
Yeah. So on my first tour, so here's like, we'll bring it back to like all that. So on my first tour in the Tomahawks in Bravo Company, 1st of the 23rd, was a young E3 that became an E4 named Colby Bulzel. And he wrote a book called My War, Killing Time in Iraq, which was based off of blog entries. And he was like the very first, we call him the blog father, but he was the very first guy to like write a military blog. And people start reading it, paying attention. And he's a gifted writer, FYI. If you haven't had the opportunity to read Colby Bulzel's like My Time, Killing War in Iraq, or Lost in America, a brilliant kind of Kerouacian, but just a really entertaining, and I believe he captured like the E3, E4 mentality of us at that time. Like, I think he did a good job representing his peer group. I don't think he did a good job representing, like our OPSEC or anything like that, but a gifted writer, which inspired me to do my own writing. My dad, just due to OPSEC reasons, I couldn't really tell him all the things that we'd done, especially in the Balkans and in Korea a little bit. So I would write my dad essays and letters to explain the people around me, to tell the story of the people around me, the personalities. My dad loved reading. And so like I tried to tell the story that my circumstance and the human condition around me to my dad. One, to kind of try and win his heart back. So like he understood, like I'm leading with everything that he taught me in terms of being a good human being. But still, like being a war fighter and being a warrior. And it just made sense to publish those in the form of a blog. And then that ended up being a book. And from that, I got some of my writing selected to be part of another book called The Sandbox. And that was by Trudeau, the cool one, not the asshole up in Canada, and the guy that wrote Doonesbury Comics. And he selected a couple of us, myself, Troy, a guy by the name of CJ Grisham, and I'm forgetting somebody else, but to contribute to, one, help create characters for Doonesbury Comics, as well as like take our writing and put it on this website and into this book. And that's actually how Troy and I got connected. He became a first sergeant. Well, he was a first sergeant and I was becoming one. We're on track. Both National Guard. He was in Afghanistan. I was in Iraq. We're both telling these kind of different stories. And it was actually the conduit of the millblogging.com, which was that website was actually created and curated by, at the time, before he sold it to military.com, by JP Borda, who was one of my soldiers in Bad Voodoo's. And you can watch and learn about Bad Voodoo Platoon through the PBS documentary by Deborah Scranton called Bad Voodoo's War. And then that storytelling, that writing, that film work and all that is what brought Troy, as well as a bunch of us, all together. And that became like the mill blogging community, which, guys like Matt Burden, Jim's, Uncle Jimbo, they had Black Five, Froggy, my boy Matt there. And so they had like Black Five, and then Ranger Up got up in the mix, and they wanted to publish some writing and, use it as a marketing tool to drive people to their website to buy T-shirts. And they created what was called the Rhino Den with Kelly Krieger. Who else was in on that? There was a bunch of guys in on that. Some amazing, I'm drawing a blank. One of my favorite guys, unbelievable stuff. They wrote like the Rhino Den. Yeah, I hope it's still up. They did like a suicide thing. It was some of the best writing, from 5 or 6 different perspectives. It was just brilliant stuff. And so we all kind of became like this mill blog thing. And we started hanging out and traveling and going to these, writers conventions or book signings. And we were all still leaders for the most part. And so we're, dealing with our wounded guys, going to Walter Reed, going to BAMC, and that introduced, put us with guys like Chuck Ziegenfuss. And I started working for an organization called Soldiers Angels. And then I did that for a couple more years, and then into Veteran Outdoors, which I did for a couple more years. So I always kind of served afterwards a little bit too, but that was pretty good. I got like my career in like minutes, just sheer minutes.
So we talked about it at the beginning. So let's talk about your feelings, what your mindset and what you thought going in. You'd already done an appointment to Bosnia, right? So you'd already had your feet wet.
Yeah.
I've heard Bosnia called the precursor or the train up for Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we deployed a lot of mechanized. I remember first AD being all over the place. But so your mindset then versus the way you look at it now in reflection.
I think we had it exceptionally easy. And the reason for that is, I think I absolutely, minus like how lazy I've become physically, intellectually, I believe that I could hang now. The kids starting out now in the military, they have so much more intellectually being demanded of them. So I want to make sure I acknowledge that. I also think that, I joined pre 9/11, so I had a bone to pick. I think anyone that joined after 9/11 knew exactly what they were like getting into. And I also want to acknowledge that, especially, for 20 years, if you raised your hand and signed your name and said you wanted that, light blue of the infantry involved in your life, you knew you knew the hammer was probably going to fall on that long polished carbine, and it was going to end up on your chest as a CIB, the Christmas edition. Like that was a reality. So to be fair, joining, knowing that I was just trying to get myself out of a bad life situation, making sure that I could become a dad or had regular money, healthcare, And I I wanted to get my citizenship. Let me also put that out there. Like, full disclosure, like, I didn't do it for altruistic reasons. I did it for very personal gain. And so now, if the circumstances are as they are now, I still think I'd have done it. I definitely think I would achieve the same that I achieved. But I don't think I'd have dismounted out of the striker with the confidence like that I did. Like, I felt like I was invincible in Iraq. Like, especially that first tour,
How
like
much of that do you think was youth?
um I was in my late 20s.
Yeah.
So some of it was, but I just think it was just I'd trained so much and trained so hard and studied so much and studied so hard that it, the confidence, dude. I'd have fought Andre the Giant. Like, I'd have fought Jack Reacher. Like, think of the biggest dude, meanest, toughest dude, and I would have like squared up with them and not thought twice. They absolutely would have like beat my, self stupid. I think I got the brakes beat off me every day, but like I didn't think like that. When we started losing guys, like there were a couple events on the first tour, like in one case for sure, I made my peace. And then coming out of it, that only fueled it a little bit more. The second time, in a different leadership capacity, feeling a little more helpless and a little more compassionate and worried about my guys, made it a lot harder emotionally. And in the end, why I didn't finish my career out, having a new kid, and my daughter was born on that, last Iraq tour. And like, my brain, I don't know. I don't know why it made the switch that it made, being as I was a father the entire time. But in that scenario, I started thinking differently, and part of that's maturity, right? Different season of life, and I was I was so spoiled. Like, I don't know how else to explain this. I was so spoiled with such unbelievable leadership that when in the end I was around the absolute worst that the military had to offer in terms of intelligence and leadership, I'd lost all faith in the system. Like, because I didn't understand how pieces of shit like that were even in it. Like, I thought it was a meritocracy. I thought it was like cream rises to the top. And then I, really kind of, at that point in time, the leadership gets, onion gets peeled back, and you see like politics, and we had, I guess the code word for it now is DEI, but at the time we had, like, there were quotas, right? So like there was, promotion quotas, and some of it was based on race and ethnicity, and and once you see that, and you're just like, why you shouldn't be a leader. Like, I watched the sergeant major of that unit get arrested for child pornography. I watched the replacement get arrested for infidelity. The battalion commander, he was just straight incompetent. He got in trouble for something.
Well, at this point, they had like a lot of the school requirements were just pretty much, you could just pause them almost indefinitely, right? I mean, because they were trying to get bodies to the war, right?
Yeah.
So
And,
you're not going to
and
BNOC, you're not going to ANOC, you're not going
right.
to POC, you're not going to anything. You're just going to get promoted.
Yeah. And another, like, a big issue is I love the infantry. That's because God does as well. And the infantry used to be like where the smart guys were, where the standards were higher. It was OSIT, one station unit training. And to get people in, they lowered the recruiting standards. So, they started taking felonious people. They started taking, like people that didn't pass background checks, security issues. Like I had guys that had like gang tattoos. And, like when I came in, like you couldn't have fun tattoos. And now all of a sudden, like you got guys with shit on their hands and, things like
I remember
helmet
getting
swords.
tattoo checks at 3 o'clock in the morning at Fort Bragg.
Yeah, no, like,
And if you had something that was, even questionable, CID got a report.
oh yeah. And, like all that stuff changed. And, there were these guys that were coming in claiming infantry because, they did a 2-week gentleman's like weekend class with some guy. It's like, that's not what makes you infantry. Like you have to be more than that. And, like I was just like, no, this is not the force. I had talked to I'd talked to some people about going a different direction, and serving in a different capacity. And, we came really close to that. But the biggest issue was citizenship, and we were having a hard time getting the military to like wave off some of the stuff and swear me in. And it was a huge frustration. Like I earned my U.S. citizenship. I earned it by law, by legislation, not by ED, but by like law passed House and Senate in 2002, or 2003, sorry, by like letting the hammer fall. Right, I served in combat, killed in combat, shed blood, and like that earned my citizenship. And here we are, 20 years later, still not sworn in. That's a whole different story. But no, like I was just so disheartened and discouraged, that like the government didn't take care of our guys. Like deployed out of the state of California. How I ended up being in that unit was bullshit, like shadiness. It was a straight rug pull. Then my guys, re-enlisted overseas to get that tax-free bonus. The state of California taxed them anyway. And then when they applied for the refund, everyone got like a IOU for it, and it's like they stole that, literally stole thousands of dollars from deployed service members, the state of California, and we're unapologetic about it, to include the chain of command. Like we took that to the adjutant general, the tag of the state of California. And in the end, like 8 or 9 years after the fact, they won a class action lawsuit against them to get, pennies on the dollar that they were owed. Right. Because California is just, and I lost faith. I lost faith in the entire system, and I tried working for something, like para, and, made it pretty far in that process. But in the end, it just boiled down to like, without that citizenship, it just couldn't happen. And I was pretty bitter, pretty heartbroken, and then got out. That was it.
What year was that? What year did you retire?
I didn't retire. I quit.
You quit. Okay.
And that was officially 2010.
2010. So that's 15
late,
years.
Yeah,
About
late.
15 years.
Yep. Yeah, like right in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, dude, as with making the last list and all that stuff, like without a doubt, I'd have been like a star for sure, maybe with a wreath,
Right.
before 20, like undoubtedly, like especially being Audie Murphy and everything else. Like,
Oh yeah.
Like but I just, man, once you see your future and what, like, and then, the administration changed, like, like I'll say, like, man, I met President Bush on several occasions, and every time I met him, he left me feeling wanted, needed, appreciated, loved. Um, he while he was our boss, he's everyone's boss. He didn't take us lightly, and he cared about us, and it showed with him and his wife walking the halls of Walter Reed, Bethesda, BAMC, Bilboa every Friday without compromise. If he was in the continental United States, he went every Friday and visited his wounded and took accountability and looked him in the eye, apologized for them getting hurt, apologized for, but saying thank you. If they didn't get their Purple Heart yet, he was the guy that pinned it on them. I mean, the president of the United States pinned more Purple Hearts than anybody else. Think about that. I mean, like, guy was just like, he loved his force. And then to go to somebody that, like, I was a guest in 2008 at the inauguration. I was a guest of the Heroes Red, White, and Blue Ball, sent there on orders, and like, dude didn't even show up.
Not to get all political, but it really does come down to, most times, someone who served versus someone who hasn't in that position, I think.
Yeah, no, like absolutely. I think there's truth to that, but I also think it's just understanding.
The role you play.
You have to understand, and I'll take it one further. I believe you to lead at that capacity, at that level, you have to love the Bill of Rights. Like, you have to believe it. It has to be, stitched into the fabric of your soul. And if it is not stitched in the fabric of your soul, you shouldn't be in that position, because that document, that living document, is what keeps the world from killing itself. Like, I know it sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like flippant, but it really is. The fact that the United States of America has the First Amendment keeps the rest of the world honest. Like, and if you don't believe that, you just witnessed it last week, where everyone's up in arms about J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, telling the European Union facts.
Yeah.
Like, not feelings.
Yeah.
Facts. Like, the reason he can do that is because the United States has the First Amendment. Like, that's the only reason. It's not because he's got a boss with weird hair, like, it's because the First Amendment, he has the right to do that. The reason he's in the position he's in is because he wrote a book about his service, about his life, and shared it with the world and humbled himself. First Amendment. Second Amendment. When the government, tries to, like, put their thumb on you, you have the right to defend yourself. The Third Amendment. They can't just come in your house and take your cattle from you to feed you. They got to go through a procurement process, and it has to be fair, and the citizenry get represented in that. 4, unlawful search and seizure. Like, the ability to be secure in your belongings and your paperwork and in your identity. Like, the Fifth Amendment, the right of self-incrimination, the protection from self-incrimination. Sixth Amendment, lawyer, due process. That's what makes America, the United States of America, so special. And if that's not stitched into the fabric of your soul, you shouldn't be leading it. And what we witnessed in that administration and in the last administration, to an extent, is like that wasn't there. Like they don't understand. They don't understand the cost of that or the brevity of that. And no, like so now I think I would take it a lot differently.
So let's shift gears a little bit here. So let's what are at least three, and you can go more, it's up to you. At least three events, stories, however you want to call it, that you think are important for everybody to know. Whether something happened to you, something you witnessed, something, good, bad, ugly, sad, doesn't matter.
I will. One, I witnessed heroism, gallantry in the face of death. April 9th, 2004, the Battle of Dewasa Street. I saw a young kid that we made fun of because we believed he had a bit of an identity crisis, wielding a saw that he was handed to almost as a punishment for being a little guy or a smaller guy, like it was a pistol, and just cutting the enemy down to protect his leader that got hung up and was stuck in the middle of the street. Like one of the bravest things I ever saw. Like narrow street, walls, bullets flying everywhere, just absolute, all bad. And the guy that you least expect to step up in that moment did. And seeing true heroism, like I'm expected to do that as a leader. You're expected to do that. That's your job, actually. It's not heroic. There's a little bit of bravery involved, obviously, and like stupidity, but there's an expectation, like that's your job, is to take care of your guys.
Calm, cool,
To see someone like not expected of that. I witnessed a separate incident. I witnessed a young girl, finance clerk, helping defend her convoy. And, like she ended up getting a Bronze Star, and, my guys, didn't, because she didn't rack up the number of kills that they did. They felt like she was like, didn't deserve the award. And it's like, dude, she was far braver than any of you guys. Like, there's no expectation for her to shoot back. I'm about to counsel you on, like, I saw you missing some guys. I saw you wasting ammo. I'm about to write you up. I'm about to counsel you. But no, like I witnessed bravery, and that's helped me keep things in perspective the rest of my life. I witnessed the truth in leadership, and like I worked with guys like Ralph Kluna, Adam Rock, Chuck Hodges, Buck James, William T. James, all guys I still maintain a relationship with, especially guys like Adam Rock and Ralph Kluna, because like they shaped my life. And John Blue, man, like these guys really, my dad put the genetics in me. They put the key to unlock them. And I just, to witness such great men, like there are a couple of women in there too, but like to truly witness great men doing great things. And another thing, like, again, the expectation, and to see young guys, like there's a guy, the Cal guard that worked with us, Baker, and like, here's a guy that didn't have the experience that I had, didn't have the schooling that I had, or like he was a guardsman. And that guy like stepped up and, like in the absence of leadership, made really good decisions. And I couldn't have been prouder to have been around guys like him. And I was like their supervisor, and, to know that people like that were really where the rubber meets the road in terms of American foreign policy. Like we were in good hands. So like, I would say that, one of the things I'm proudest of my career about is like the most insignificant thing that people don't, like a lot of people don't even know happened. And I helped a little girl go to school in Iraq, and I did it in a kind of a legal gangster way. And I ended up getting an award for it. But that's because like I didn't know I would be a girl dad at that point in time. I was just a dad, and I had a heart for kids, and I just, like the idea that because she was a little girl, she didn't deserve, and she was an orphan, that she didn't deserve an opportunity in life, and we could do that for her. Like that to me is what, like, that's what it's really all about. Like, it's not always about, turning guys' heads into canoes and stacking skulls. Sometimes it's about like, spreading the gospel through good words and being a good human being. And you can be a good human being in war. You really can. And we need more of that. And I think we're about to witness some more of that.
You can see the best and the worst of humanity in war.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All righty, sir. Anything else?
No, man, like it's kind of weird. Like I've never like it's a fun format, but it's like it's a lot, man. Like it's a lot.
It is. Troy hit a point, and you could tell when it came to the realization of him serving and then his son serving.
Oh yeah.
Both coming back. And that's a unique situation and a unique bond that you have with a child that is rare. Is a little more common after the last 20 years, but it's still rare, very rare. And yeah, that's some heavy stuff.
Yeah, so here let me just comment on that just real quickly. That was one of the very first things at Troy's I read. We were both deployed at the same time, similar positions. He was in Afghanistan, I was in Iraq. And because I was tracking these other bloggers and like reading about and just trying to learn, right? Like learn the other battlefield. Because, there was still a chance I'd end up in that one. So you want to know everything you can. And, the best form of intelligence is, like on the objective intelligence. And, one of the very first things I read at Troy, before I even met him, before I even knew who he was, I read this thing about him saying how surreal it was to be in theater and to see his kid, and like, and to seek him out, like to go find him. And I read that, and man, like, I was like, okay, this dude can write, and two, like, wow, like, is that, like, is my kid gonna, grow up and be like that? Like, do I want that? How would I feel? Like, you're not supposed to like have favorites and stuff like that, but there are a couple, young soldiers, like you get close to your RTO, you get close to your medics, like, and stuff, you get close to your commo guy, you get, and I don't want to say they become like your favorites, but like you spend more time with you like care about them, you love them. And like, I just, like
from a 30,000 foot
view,
that's surreal.
Yeah, no, like it was one of the very first, like that was the first thing of his I read. And so when I met him, that's how I met him. I met him like by saying, you wrote this thing, and dude, like, wow.
Yeah.
Like that was our very first conversation was me fanboying, his writing about that. And here we are 20 years later.
All righty,
So,
sir. Anything else?
no, man.
All
Thanks for the
right.
opportunity.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and giving this.
I
I know
appreciate that.
take some time out of your day, but I think this is a good thing going forward. So thank you, sir.